Remix. 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 Remix.
Oh, yeah. Welcome out. This is no other than the Remix Morning Show. Right here on Black Power Media, in case you didn't know. I go by the name of the Ear Doctor, and yes, I hope y'all ready for the middle of the week, Women's Wednesday, as we get y'all prepared for another one right here with your host, Ricky Ryan. Good morning. It's the Ricky Ryan Ear Doctor Show.
I was going to say it's woman.
Woman. That's good.
Just the one.
I like you. You're nice with that. Those bars right there, Ricky. I see you.
How you?
I'm pretty good. I'm here. Present. That's what it's about. How about you?
I'm good. Kind of getting through these ebbs and flows. I think everybody's having a little rough week.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think this is just the season. There's a lot of work. It has to close up before the next events start to happen. So I think people are a bit stretched right now.
Okay. Did you do anything, any events this weekend?
Yeah, we tomorrow, in fact, I sent that to you.
Okay.
We'll be doing a speak out, so I can talk about that later a little bit. But for
Speak
Haiti,
out.
tomorrow's the day of action for Haiti. So if you are in an organization, visit blackallianceforpeace.com and go to the Haiti resource page. You can look at our toolkit, and then jump into the day of action. We have a lot of resources where you can develop a teaching, do wheat pasting, banner drops, etc. So please plug in, because it's still a situation in Haiti that has not been resolved, certainly not by the people of Haiti.
Right. Yeah. This is Women's Wednesday. We might as well see if we can get Lucretia Williams.
Hey, good morning.
Wait, is this a microphone I see in front of Lucretia? Nice.
Stop it. It's the same one, okay?
My bad. How you been, Lucretia?
Listen, I almost didn't come today. None of my stuff was working. None of it. So, but I'm here.
I was wondering, it's like a minute, 5 seconds before, I was like, where Lucretia at? But look at that.
None of it was working.
Won't she do it?
Won't she do it? 10 minutes before Lucretia, he was complaining, but I'm not going to complain.
Of course he was. Yeah.
I mean, I get up mad early to get everything prepared. I like to make
We
sure.
are, a volunteer team. So just want to point that out.
Are you?
Yeah.
You get nothing?
Volunteer with, tips, right?
Oh, okay. I was wondering. I mean, that's the waiters do that all the time,
And again, we think that's incorrect, right? So let's be honest about that.
All right, I'm gonna be quiet here. So it's National Poetry Month. Have y'all ever got into poetry or anything like that?
Wow, Air Doctor, you know so little about me. I have a whole book published.
What?
Yeah, it will be 10 years in October. It was published 2 days before I had my son.
Nice.
Yay, awesome.
All in Love is Fair.
Oh, that's what it's called? All in Love is Fair?
Like the Stevie Wonder book. So it's like a saga with a series of different types of poems. So tankards and sonnets. And
learn something new every day. What is a sonnet? I always wondered what that was.
Well, Air Doctor is very early.
Is what?
It's very early.
I wasn't prepared.
You wasn't,
No, it
wasn't
wasn't. Like, wait,
you
got
wasn't
it.
prepared to give me the knowledge. Oh
Yeah.
man. Listen, what about you, Lucretia? What about poetry in your veins?
I like poetry a lot, but I don't write any. I used to do theater in high school, so did a few
Oh,
classic ones like Antigone. I was Antigone. I did Raisin in the Sun, Arsenic and Old Lace. Yeah, quite a few.
Look at you, a true thespian coming up in here.
Mwah.
You know, eighth grade, I did do Midnight Summer's Dream.
did you now?
Yes, I did.
Who were you?
What role? Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't even want to
I'm
talk about
interested.
it.
No,
What were you?
I'm for real like a Shakespeare fan.
I was Puck.
Oh,
Uh,
Yeah,
you get
yeah.
footage.
Huh? Oh, there's no footage. There's no footage. And I actually got a little singing chops too for our eighth grade graduation. I sang "We Are the Children." I believe the children are the future. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's
yeah.
not
Now
one of
we
the
are the
children.
children. This Whitney Houston. I believe
Yeah,
the children are the future. Yeah,
yeah.
I could give you a little sample, but I'm still drinking my coffee. It's early.
hmm Like a sexual chocolate sample. Or like,
Randy Watson all day. Word. But yeah, I mean, poetry also, I did poetry. I realized I always was an MC, so that and plus the fact I started writing a book, so I might need to holler at you. I got actually a nice amount, but they so old, and I don't know if, the mind still thinks like that, but I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I do have like a nice amount of stack of poems that I could actually publish and stuff like that.
yeah,
Not
I
to
have a
ponder.
second book, but I just haven't. I don't know.
Mm.
I'm gone such a ways from that that I haven't circled back.
I mean, your
Mhm.
poetry is in your speech. I mean, when you up there talking about with doing the BAP stuff. I mean, you up there
Yeah,
spitting like a poet. I mean, that's what you do now, really. I
yeah.
mean, it might not rhyme, but I'm sure you make it sometimes.
I try not to. I try not to be one of those because, I feel like there's enough of those.
mm.
Okay. And then with you being in front of the pulpit, Lucretia, you a natural
Pulpit.
poet too.
Yeah, in the pulpit. Yeah.
Wait, I guess I said something wrong, boy.
You just made it cute. Pulpit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? How you say it?
I just say pulpit or going up there, you know. We're Unitarian Universalists, so there's not like a whole lot of need to be super correct. No, so
So yeah, in
yeah.
front of the pulpit. All right. Well, I guess we can go ahead and get to a quick break and then get to some news if y'all want to do that.
Yeah.
You got some
That's
stories,
it.
Lucretia? We good.
I'm a pretty face and a willing heart this morning. So
That's bars all day. All right, here we go. Let's go ahead and get to our first break right here on no other than the Remix Morning Show. Let's go. Big up to that poet, Paula Abdul, because she straight up will tell you what it is. All right, yo, big up to everybody that's tuning in right here, right now. This is the Remix Morning Show. Excuse me. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that like button, that subscribe button, and go to patreon.com and get footage over there that's rare. And you can also drop something right here. So this isn't just a voluntary thing here on the Remix Morning Show. We actually put some money in the pockets of these beautiful women on the screen. All right. With that said, let's get to it. What are we going to talk about first? All right, let's go ahead and let's take you to a musical journey. I know it's Women's Wednesday, but there was this one song that reminded me of the beauty of women and the singer. And he goes by the name of Freddie Jackson. Yes, Freddie Jackson. Let me tell you about Freddie Jackson, also known as Frederick Anthony Jackson. He's coming straight out of New York City, Harlem to be exact. And he came out, actually started in the 70s, the late 70s. You didn't even know that. But late 70s, he started off with a band called Mystic Merlin out in California. But before he got to California, I'll give you all that info. He came out with big hits like Rock Me Tonight for Old Time's Sake. That came out in 1985. Have You Ever Loved Somebody? Jam Tonight. Do Me Again. And the one I was talking about is You Are My Lady. Yeah, that came out in 1985 too. He also did some soundtracks. All Dogs Go to Heaven, did a little duet with Irene Cara. But he also was in the movie King of New York. You got to go check that movie out again and see if you could see Freddie Jackson. But he was a gospel singer at first. And then he was on the nightclub scene, wound up moving out west, and like I said, hooking up and getting into a group out there. And then he's like, all right, well, that's cool. Wound up moving back to New York and got with a writer, producer, and got signed to Capitol Records. But he was discovered by Melba Moore, actually, after she saw him in the nightclub and was like, yo, this guy got chops. So after that, got signed. Dropped Rock Me Tonight, his debut album in 1985, and then took off from there. You talking about hitting hit after hit after hit after hit. And then after a while, you know, as time went on, but he still kept coming out with albums after albums after albums. To make it clear, to be clear on this, your man put out like 14 albums, if you ain't even know, actually from 85 all the way to 2023. His last album being My First Love. So he's been putting in the work for a long time. And at the same time, he had a little beef. He didn't like the fact that George Michael was getting on the black music charts and getting all this success. So he called him out in the magazine. And, you know, they ain't like that. But it was what it was. He was like, yo, me and Luther Vandross is killing it right now. Y'all giving all the props to George Michael. It is what it is. But that's what it is. That's Freddie Jackson. Go check out his music if you don't know about it already. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and get back to the Remix Morning Crew. You know how we do. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say Love Survives on All Dogs Go to Heaven is like top tier. I love that song.
That's the one with Irene Cara.
Yeah.
Yeah. What happened to Irene Cara? I'm going to have to do something on her.
But also, this is a Peebo Bryson, George Michael household. So I just
You
want
need to relax. He need to relax on George Michael.
Like what was said about George? Don't play.
Yeah. You know anything about Freddie Jackson, Lucretia?
No, I love learning every time there's a music segment. So
yeah. Him, it was a time when like it was just him, Luther, then you had Sade, and who else was really killing it on the R&B scene? But really, those three right there, it was killing it on the R&B scene. And it was almost like a back and forth with Luther and him. Like they would try to do the comparisons like they always do with all. Nobody can ever just have a bunch of good singers. It's always a comparison. But it was a good time in music. And it was a lot of love songs, and there was a lot of slow dancing. And I remember those days at the end of the party, that slow song come on. And
how was that for you, Ear Doctor? Did it work out?
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I was still kind of young though at that time, but those slow songs, I miss that at the end of the party. That's why I still try to rock that out. We do that now with reggae songs. We put on some rockers at the end of the night and then let people get together and dance. So yeah. All right,
which reggae songs do you put on, Ear Doctor?
You're gonna have to come to a party. Hire me, y'all, and then y'all can find out.
No, I can't afford you.
Right?
I'm gonna be a volunteer. Living off tips.
Yeah, you can use some of that Bat Bunny. Stop playing.
I don't know if I can afford you, Ear Doctor.
Oh man, I give y'all a discount. No, you can discount money in my pocket. All right, I'll catch y'all on the next break.
Peace. I'm here to support you, Ricky.
Right, I'm not Kim Brown, but I'm going to give my best effort. You know, welcome to the Remix Morning Show. It's Women's Wednesday. I'm Erica Kane, joined by Lucretia James, and it's just the two of us today. So it'll be a little bit of a struggle because I didn't come with that many stories, but if Ear Doctor wants to pull it up, please don't forget to like, subscribe, I sound like my son. He's like, don't forget to like and subscribe. But yeah, how have you been, Lucretia?
Um, Good. I have a headache this morning, but I'm happy to be here. And today is Passover. It's still Passover. It's one of my favorite holidays. So, um, yeah, I love talking about liberation and the ways to get there. So, yeah, I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a better week. Last week was rough. This week is what it is. Um, but yeah, dear doctor, if you're ready to spot the map, we can get started.
Welcome
Peace,
out.
peace,
Welcome out.
peace. All right, I did want to start with this first story from Cradle Media. I love Cradle. I was introduced to it about 2 years ago. Really great reporting. But I did want to circle back to this, primarily because yesterday, or I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before, it's been 6 days of investigations, but over 200 bodies were found in a mass grave in the courtyard of Nasser Hospital in Gaza. And I think it's really important to kind of circle back to that because we're seeing a lot of the conversation is about these student protests in these encampments. And they are, in solidarity with Gaza, but more importantly, they are calling for the divestment of these arms deals and investments into Israel. But what is not have been talked about, because we were talking about repression of these students and things like that. Currently, I know last night, I believe there was talk about the National Guard being called for Columbia students and faculty and protesters that are out there calling for the divestment. They've been popping up at NYU. Faculty was assaulted trying to protect students who were observing the Cedar. So there is repression happening, but what I do think is happening is a focus away from the resistance. So I do want to read a little bit about this. I'm going to try because it have to be putting up these small letters. Yemen's armed force. Can you enlarge that because I really can't? Okay, Yemen's armed forces. Thank you. Threatened on 22nd April to expand military operations against Israeli-linked ships in the Red Sea, Arab Sea, and the Indian Ocean following the discovery of mass graves in Gaza, Nasser Medical Complex. Quote, for the 7th month in a row, the genocidal crimes of the Israel enemy continue, the latest of which is the brutal massacre of Nasser Medical Complex and Khan Yunis. End quote, the armed forces said via a statement on Yemen's Mazara channel. The statement continued, quote, the genocidal crimes that Palestinian people are facing in Gaza and the occupied West Bank reflect an unparalleled level of Zionist hatred and crime, end quote. The statement by Yemen called to escalate their operations in the Red Sea, adding the Sinai continues in full support for the people of Gaza. On Sunday, over 200 bodies were found across 2 mass graves located in the Khan Yunis Nasser Medical Complex. Gaza's government media office announced that about 700 victims are expected to be found. Quote, we found in the Nasser complex corpses without heads and bodies without skins, and some of them had their organs stolen, end quote. The media office said, quote, the occupation executed dozens of displaced, wounded, sick, and medical staff, end quote. And I can end it there. I do want to also note that they found medical staff still with their scrubs, bounded with execution style. They found patients with catheters still inside of them in those mass graves, and children as well. So when we talk about what's happening in Palestine, I think it's really, really, really important to reflect the resistance and center the resistance, because that really is the heart of the fight back. And our role here is only to support. And I think what's happening, what always happens, because there's a failure to sort of go back and study the movements that we have been a part of in this last decade. I mean, we can see from Wall Street, right? That movement. When we look at this sort of the captivation from the masses, especially the youth, and it's racist, right? And it's valid, but then it's also decentralized. It's also about mobilization, no real sense of organization, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying that this is particularly the case of what we're seeing here in the encampments, but what I am saying is it's very important that we recognize that our role is one role in a larger fight back for Palestine. And it can't be centered in the way that it's centered. There is no conversation about a mass grave with 200 plus bodies. None, anywhere in mainstream media. However, what they are doing is agitating these encampments with, trying to discuss this in a manner of anti-Semitism and Jewish students are not feeling safe, et cetera, et cetera. And then, on the flip side of that, we're talking mostly about the repression. But again, I don't want to see this be moved away from what's actually happening in Gaza, whether it is this mass grave or the resistance against the Zionist entity of Israel.
The organ harvesting is truly disturbing, among other things. And, as the genocide of the Palestinians continues, I think we need to remember that this is the second mass grave in as many months that was discovered, right? So that's also important to lift up. And I think there's also no discussion in our media, especially about the actual military resistance on the ground of the different coalitions in Gaza, like Islamic Jihad and the Al-Qassam brigades, right? And this comes after a huge operation. I think I'm going to pronounce this city wrong, Tukarim, which is just outside of Gaza, right on the border. And these soldiers of the resistance forces put up a huge fight there, and they are supported by the people, as evidenced on the ground, on sources that are actually in Arab media and other media in the region, and also that they are in conversation with other resistance groups across the region, like in Yemen, and also in Lebanon. Because remember, Israel is launching a multi-front war, right? It's not just the occupied territories, right? They have dreams of expansion into Lebanon, right? Throw in Jordan and Syria. So it's not just, right? It's not just what could be happening here. And so even if we may not be mindful of that, it's definitely on the Zionist entity's mind of expansion. Then the second thing is that the U.S. just approved a couple days ago, or was it yesterday, $96 billion, both for Ukraine and Israel. So
Taiwan. Yeah, they just tossed in Taiwan. Why not?
And Taiwan, why not? Right? And it's clear that they are interested in fueling war all across the region. And so I think it's so important, Ricky, to, like you said, center the people that are on the ground in all of these places. And yes, I think at the same time, we can still have those conversations around. I've seen posts from different organizing groups about, how to do an encampment and things like that. And I think those sort of, and correct me, Ricky, strategies and or tactics are important for people to know. But I think, like you said, it should still be held in tandem with what's happening on the ground.
Yeah. And then I get that it's a chaotic situation, in most of these encampments. But what I would love to see, especially in New York, because this is happening in multiple universities now in New York, the state and not just the city. I know Cornell just had their referendum passed, and I believe Rutgers might have had their referendum passed as well. Um, New York University has encampments, Columbia, obviously. But what I'm not seeing is, as we're seeing this repression happening on these students and faculty and staff, in defense of Palestine, in defense of or to bring recognition to what's happening in Gaza. What I would love to see is the connection to the deadly exchange. The same tactics that's being used against the faculty and the staff and all of that is a part of the training. The NYPD has a headquarters in Tel Aviv. Like, we can't miss these opportunities to make these broader connections, especially with people who may just be passing by confused, like, why are these students doing these things? What is this about? Because there are always going to be people who are onlooking. And I think it's really up to us as organizers to go and to be in those spaces and organize those spaces, because we know that people are attracted to mobilization, and they're attracted to the moment, and many people want to be a part of a moment and be a part of history, to say, like, I was there when, right? And we've seen that with the 2020, we've seen that with Mike Brown. A lot of people will tell you that they were at the protests, right? um, but what about the organization after? And that's what's really important, because the organization brings that sort of strategy and tactics that would align with what's happening in the resistance. And I do think that it's really, really important. And then also, it helps center why are we even having the encampments, right? Because in the beginning, like, the Colombian students who, I guess, started this really had to release a statement saying, wait, hold on, don't be in solidarity with us. Be in solidarity with Gaza, like, center Gaza. And that's really, really important, that we do that. Because, like you said, yesterday marked 200 days of genocide. 200 days. So we're approaching 200 days. 96 billion just passed after they soft shoot a ceasefire call that never was, right? That never happened. So what do we do now? What is the next steps? And I think so long as there's a fixation on this mobilization tactically, we're not really bringing in enough people in an organized fashion to really get some tactics going. And this is not to say that it's not happening, but if we're talking about getting the masses of people on board, driving them away from the Democratic Party, who is hell bent. I think Nancy Pelosi said to support or defend Israel's in our blood. I think something like that. I don't want to paraphrase, right? But Joe Biden, of course, if there wasn't an Israel, we have to invent it. So there is a tie there. And even with the uncommitted votes, tactically, we're seeing a lot of things happening. But I would like to embrace more of a political education, popular education front alongside of these things. And I think that really is dependent on organizers to be there in support of these students, to push them in a particular direction, not to lead them, not to tell them what to do, but to encourage the youth to broaden these campaigns and to strengthen their numbers.
So, as the students continue to protest, and I believe, graduation is coming up in a couple weeks for a lot of them, I wonder how it will turn out in terms of, I think at least at Columbia, that's usually where they have it, the graduation and the commencement there. As I continue to be an encampment on the quad. So I'm kind of wondering what will happen in a few weeks, but also beyond that, right? As we move into it's already pretty intense. America has one of the most ridiculous election cycles on the planet. We have to talk about it, 4 years in advance. As soon as someone gets elected, it's like, we should be thinking about the next one, which I think is just a part of that pacing, especially as we were watching the genocide unfold, that keeps us kind of in a daze of what's happening, and so that's just my wondering about as we come up towards the election too. And then I think the demonizing, right, and the smearing of these protests we've seen have shown us the cards of the Zionists because it's the same tactics, right? Like these people are terrorists, really hampering up that fear. And not to say that there is not anti-Semitism in the world, right? I think, as we've discussed here many times, right, Zionism is a anti-Semitic idea itself. And, Jewish Voices for Peace and other organizations, both inside and outside of Palestine, have been speaking up against these accusations of anti-Semitism on the student protesters. So I think it's important for people who are able to parse apart, like you said, especially organizers who are able to pull apart the seeds of Zionism with Judaism, is important to add to the context.
Yeah, because universities, I was going to say, they remain a site of struggle, and they should be seen as such. And it's why I pushed back on these last couple of years around the way that people talk about academia. And I've done that primarily as someone who just gets accosted with that term. And I'm no academic, right? I don't have a degree. So the idea that I would have particular ideas or thoughts, or the way that I express it, be aligned with academia and then sort of demonished or demonized in such a way that it's like, to disregard everything I said because like I come from some sort of ivory tower or something like that, or I come from a particular mode of thought. But I'm a materialist, so it comes with that. I don't necessarily have to be inside of any walls, but as such, people have kind of like moved away from understanding the role of students in organizing and youth in organizing primarily, right? Because even how youth is addressed, youth is seen as children, and that's it, right?
That's right.
Once they get into, because I know there's an emphasis in understanding, themselves as adults, as young adults, but they're still part of this a grouping of the youth. And when we look historically of the role that the youth has played, especially on campuses, when we look at the expansion of Columbia primarily, right, that was a part of a struggle with CUNY schools, the city, the neighborhoods around it, and the way that these universities have expanded and designed themselves. And you see how these quads are set up, is to deter these kind of protests and these student activities that were of the past. So I think all of these things are important to note in terms of, because I think also with April 23rd, 1968 was another Columbia University student protest, I believe, that people were highlighting. So these are really, really important connections that people need to be making in terms of how we begin to organize around these things, right? Because if you don't know if you don't really understand the mechanisms of what you're up against, then what are you actually fighting? And I can really appreciate that there are students who are on the ground pulling people back into, hold on, wait, before you get too excited, before show up with your kiafas and you start dancing and you want to have a good time. This is why we're here, and this is what this is about. But also, look how many schools are invested in Israel. And I would love to see an expansion of that, because not only are they invested in Israel, but they're invested in AFRICOM and the Indo-Pacific Command, which is why Taiwan is getting money, right? So yeah, we have to make those connections with Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and what's the other one? Raytheon, because all of that is happening through student research projects at these big money universities. So a lot of the students that are protesting are part of those research projects.
Right.
It's important to make those connections.
Yeah, and I think, I guess the only other thing I have is, like you said, with the research and investment, one of the demands is, the divestment from these companies. Yes, it is a problem of imperialism. And I think you see that in the headlines, right? Like, why does a billionaire who donates to Columbia, why does that person get a headline in our media saying, these people are, effing crazy. Like, why does that even need to be a headline from this rich person? Oh, because they donated $1 billion to Colombia. Like, and the fact that, more people aren't outraged yet shows how much the money has capitalized our education system, and these companies in turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all.
Y'all are bringing it. I'm learning so much back here, so I appreciate that. And I guess what we could do from here is we can let's what's that in the chat room right there. We can we have another story, y'all. So let me get off screen and get to work. Or should we take a break and then come back to this story?
No, I do want to know what you thought about all that's going on, and Doctor, because I don't think I really heard your thoughts around Israel and Gaza and the situation, because it's now 201 days.
Yeah, I mean, it's still colonizers colonizing to me. I mean, that's what they do, and it needs to be like the point that we have this media right here to be able to put it out to the world to let people know what's going on. And like y'all say, they hiding a lot of stuff within the other medias and giving you a false narrative. So the fact that we're able to do this here is putting it out to more people. But does it seem like people are so involved in themselves? Does it seem like they even care what's going on outside of their world? Because like what y'all doing right now is putting it out there and actually showing some love to these people, and nobody else is really doing it. They're just going on with their regular day. So like I said, to me, it's just colonizers colonizing. That's what they do. And this war is crazy, and I don't know what's going to bring it to an end. I mean, what is the solution to this, really?
Yeah. Well, I would say, to Lucretia's point, this is an election year, right? But also, we're not like, it doesn't happen every 4 years that we're made to kind of think, because we have off-year elections, and then we have primary elections, and then we have, runoffs. So there's always, it's just circular. Every 6 months to a year, there's always a conversation around elections. And then to that point, it's always heightened to such a way, like this is the most important election.
Mhm.
We have to save democracy. So it does deter people from actually looking at what's being done by not just one party or the other, but simultaneously by both. And not just in Gaza and what's happening in Palestine, but Ukraine and Zimbabwe and the Sahel and Haiti and Congo and Sudan and Nicaragua and Venezuela. Like they're doing it countlessly all over, with sanctions, with USAID, with these different policies and acts, with interfering in other people's elections. And then also we have a population that's propagandized, right? Where news is funneled in a particular way. So even when we talk about independent media, this heightened dependency on social media and TikTok primarily is problematic, right? And I do think, to your point, we do need media entities like this, like Congress, like Black Agenda Report, like Breakthrough News. And I think the importance of media entities like this is that we are tied to organizations in one way or the other. So we do have a perspective where we can bring to a mass of people that they wouldn't otherwise get. But I do think it is important to note the level of propaganda that we're facing, right? Because right now the conversation is battle rap.
Right. That's pretty much the media thing right now. It's battle rap. That's all we're hearing about over here. And what is it going to take for people over here to actually pay attention? Like, does the genocide have to start over here? And we're
already in an ongoing genocide, right? But like I said earlier, I think that's why the PE portion of these mass mobilizations matter, because then you need to start making these connections. Why should people care? Because the deadly exchange. If 200 bodies could pop up there from an IDF that trains the police here, what do you think is going on here?
With the whole
we have missing people here from police. We just found the mass grave.
Hello.
We just found that mass grave in Mississippi, right? So we need to start making these connections. And then to the point, I see somebody in the chat talking about, well, what about reparations? Well, where's our money going? 96 billion just went to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan to support a war, to continue war, to expand NATO, to expand U.S. and Western hegemony. We have to begin to make these connections and make people understand why they should care, right? Because nobody is going to be made to care. It's the same question, I think, that's always lingering, right? How do we bring people to consciousness? Do people just become conscious? No. Nobody wakes up one day and be like, okay, I understand what's going on. You might not
imperialism.
Right.
No.
You're not understanding that you're poor, or that, work sucks, or you're not being treated fairly, or there's some inequality. But the why, that doesn't just happen. The why has to be taught. The why has to be understood. And that's where that comes in. So when we see these mass encampments and they say, oh, they want people to divest from Israel. Well, why? Tell them why.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is important.
It seems like it has to be wrapped up into to get it to this mass over here in America. It seems it has to be wrapped up in, like, this is what's going over there. This is what's coming here next, like as in with the cop cities and stuff like that. This is what they're planning to possibly do next. So y'all need to pay attention to what's going on over there so y'all can prepare and start being able to get in organizations and start being able to fight against this whole genocide. So I think that's what's going to help. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the only thing I'll add is, like, I don't know, I love history. So, like, this has already happened, right? So Ricky just mentioned the mass grave. Like, the Philadelphia was already bombed, right? That was moved back in before I was born. Constant white mob terrorism, burning down our communities with, zero repercussions. We have people being run over by the police. This happened to a young man. I can't remember where he was. Was it Mississippi? I mean, the genocide is already happening. And so I think it's just, and I get it because it's a lot, right? It's ongoing, 200 plus years of genocide of Black and Indigenous people in this country, and others. So I think just it's important to keep the connections alive and not just, and I think that was a big thing with the civil rights movement, because I grew up thinking like, oh, that was cute. I didn't come from a radical family, so it was like, ooh, cute, like protesters on the bridge, yay, and like we kind of did it. But I didn't realize that there were all these fronts, right, of resistance, right? There were the people that were saying, we should do maybe more nonviolent sit-ins or something like that. There were people that were like, we need to be armed, right? I didn't know that there was this diversity of tactics, because the one that's only sold to you is the one that is allowed by the establishment, right? But even then, there were all of these differences, right? Like Dr. King told the Freedom Riders that he thought that it was too dangerous, right? But they did it anyway. And that was just one action, one particular action. So I think keeping the historic connections alive to say that, like, it's not coming. It has already been happening, and it will only continue to get worse.
Yeah. And not to make it comparative, because I want to reiterate, solidarity is not transactional, right? And it's not, we're talking about a people-centered human rights, right? And that should be the foundation to which we are in solidarity. And not because, it could happen here and it has happened here, but because it shouldn't happen anywhere. Least of all to 30,000 people, 17 of which are children. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it has to be more visual. I mean, the fact that even that article was talking about what they said, cutting their skin off and harvesting organs. It needs to be more visual, and I think that'll cause more of an uproar. But the media knows that, so they're like, all right, let's talk about battle rap.
And like even the language, right? Sorry, I keep coming up with but even the language, right, that we've seen is a subtle but effective way, right? Like Palestinians have died, right? Not like were killed by rockets, right? They kind of just poof out of existence. Even that little distancing in the language and the headlines and the way we talk about this normalizes genocide.
Yeah.
But I don't know, A-Rob, he said we don't need visuals. I think we do. I mean, that's the point where we talked about when they say what does they put on the screen, like be prepared for this or whatever. I forget what the trigger word is.
Trigger warning.
Trigger warning. Yeah, the trigger warning is like, here's the trigger warning. And then you be like, oh, I don't want to see it. It's too much. But I think it needs to be too much because that's the only way we get it. Like when the brother down here in Georgia got his organs taken out. I mean, that was like, oh man. Then we got together, we organized. So the fact that we need to see this stuff going on is gonna hit us like, oh shit, this could be here next. So I think all that stuff needs to be put out.
I go back and forth. A couple months ago, I think I wrote this. I did write it for my Patreon, where I referenced Tip of the Spear and what was happening in Palestine, and just asking the question about, essentially, if we see ourselves here as colonized people within the U.S. empire, why have we shied away from the ways that we talk about our own genocide, right? It is done in such a way with a trigger warning where, that people have to be reminded, no, we are in an ongoing war here. But because it is, I don't know, I go back and forth. Like I understand, because where we are 200 days into the genocide, I have seen a lot. Because the Palestinians have not been shy from holding their children up into the camera and letting you know this is what the IOF has done, this is what the Zionist entity has done. I have seen people carry their children in bags. I have seen a lot, right? And I don't necessarily think I'm desensitized from any of it, but I'm also, I don't know to what extent that has been a motivator for people, right? And people are motivated by different things. Some people need to see that to say, oh shit, I didn't know it was that deep, right? Yeah. I just thought it was, a war. I didn't know that these people, it was happening in this way. And then some people can't see that, right? Because it just makes their whole body shut down. They can't move and things like that. I have a friend who is in organizing that's like, I can't be on Instagram. It's a lot. And I have to, promote my stuff. We got to promote events. And every time I go in there, it's like dead baby. Like, and so it's a lot. So I go back and forth. But I do think it's a question that we need to really consider and ask ourselves and take seriously around what is needed to actually motivate the masses of our own people to get up and rise up and start to organize ourselves into this larger fight back. And maybe that's a diversity of tactics, right? Maybe that does include showing people, but then also having that space to say, you've seen that, this is how we process what we just seen, right? Because I also think that that's necessary too, and there's no space for that either. It's just like, this is what's happening because this is happening, but there's no real effort in talking to people like, I know what we just saw was a lot, and this, how do we process that? Because it's going to keep happening, and we're going to see much more.
Those visuals will have you having dreams, nightmares, and messing with your sleep to the point where you like, listen, this ain't right. Because right now, people just like, okay, it's a war. They over there fighting. And they always hear about wars in other countries, but they never see the real visuals. They never know about the drone strikes. They don't know about all this stuff. So I think it is important that it's put out there. And I would hate to put the visuals up, but I mean, shit, you got to do what you got to do to get the message out. But, yeah. Woo! All right, with that said, I need a break. Yeah, but y'all, I appreciate the info that y'all are giving out to the people. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with some more right here on the Remix Morning. Let me make sure I got that right. Show. Let's go. That's right, we speaking poetry. That's right, that's a song that came out, KRS-One, Boogie Down production. Production by D Nice. Y'all know DJ D Nice was down with BDP as a producer? That's right, he was. A little bit of hip-hop history there. All right, so with that said, please make sure y'all hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and go to patreon.com, become a member over there and get footage that's rare. All right, so it is National Poetry Month. So with that said, I wanted to bring forth a poet from a whole nother place and space, and at the same time, age, a younger age that I think you will enjoy. And here it is. Check this poem out for Poetry Month. Let's go.
I am a girl with a dream. I dream of the future which I have not yet seen in the nature and adventure of my culture. I go to school in a cold and rainy season with bare feet, a torn uniform, and no books. I go in a lonely way where the only strangers, robbers, and drunkards. They attack me, they rape me, and leave me on the ground crying. I try and cry to get up, but I just can't. I'm a girl with a dream. My dreams can be compared to the great earthquake that shakes the whole wide world, leaving it with no sound. I stand in a point in life where decisions are hard to make, and I stand so unsure and uncertain because the future that seemed so far is far no more, and I approach it with closed eyes. This is my dream, but because of the insecurities and barriers faced by us the youths, it's so hard to reach out for our goals, and we say we are nothing. But I stand so firmly and I say I can do it, for this is my dream, and only as much as I dream can I be.
All right, there you go. A little bit of national poetry taking you all the way to the motherland so you can see what's going on over there. And if it's not put out there, a lot of people won't know. So that's the part. That's the big thing about music. That's the big thing about literature. That's the big thing about poetry and using it in music and being able to put a message out there that people can listen to and relate to and be introduced to. So with that said, continue with all our poets. Big up to all y'all. Continue to do what you're doing, and we'll continue to do what we're doing right here on Black Power Media. All right, let's get back to the Remix Morning Crew. Now we do. Yeah.
Who published that poem?
Those questions I don't have the answer for right now.
Well, look that up and look up what's a sonnet when you get a chance.
Okay, that would be a sonnet.
Check in at 9:50, or
Yeah, check back, circle back. No, I mean, I feel I don't like to say that I'm a poet, right? Mm-hmm. I've written poetry, I've published poetry, but I don't consider myself a poet. But I actually have a strong distaste for spoken word.
Ooh, tell me why. I love when I find people that have like actual opinions about this. They're like, I love it or I hate it. And I just like watching people talk about it.
Show the definition, the difference between spoken word and poetry, because I thought they was the same.
Well, no, spoken word is poetry.
Mm-hmm. I was like, so why don't you?
But written, there's written works, and then there's people who spit, and there are really good ones. Like Black is good, Too Black is good. I have a dope friend, B. Charisse, who used to be in the DC spoken word circuit. But spoken word is just one form of poetry. And some people, like the two I named, are good at it. Tongo is good at it. Mm-hmm. And then some people, like the majority of people who do it, are not. And I feel Issa Rae used to have this internet show called Awkward Black Girl. And the one thing I always remember from that is when she said, like, poetry and rap had a baby. It's called spoken word, and she wished they would have aborted that baby. And like, I felt that strongly in my heart, in the spirit. But I don't know.
I get it, because it's like sometimes I would go to poetry events and and it's that performance, and it's like I was like, all right, get to what you saying. I mean, I get the whole performance part of it, but I mean, I guess that's a style, but it's it's kind of corny after a minute, after a while. Maybe that's just my thoughts, but yeah, I can't take it. I ain't
No,
gonna front.
yeah.
I
There's
mean,
people who have the range, and there's people who don't. But I think that's with most things.
yeah, I come from the MC and rhyming, so all my poems, where I would say almost like rhymes. I mean, really, I mean that's the poetry
Yeah.
I know of, and I never wrote nothing without rhyming. So
Someone just said go back to the foundations of spoken word, the Black arts movement, and that's why I said like people like Tongo, Too Black, B. Sharice, they remind me of that era, right?
mm,
Because even in the Black arts movement, it wasn't that like what you just said, right?
hmm,
It does seem very put on.
yeah,
But like I said, with most things these days, kind of seeing that heavy emphasis of theatrics. Some people that's their jam. That's why they are patrons at Busboy and poets, but I am not. So
Mm.
right, right. Well, I checked the news that Erica provided for us, and I seen one story, and I was trying to get your thoughts on it. This right here, the Supreme Court effectively abolishes the right to mass protest in 3 states. It's no longer safe to organize a protest in Louisiana, Mississippi, or Texas. Did y'all hear anything about this?
I
yeah,
did.
I did hear about it. I can read a little bit about it, but I
Yeah.
also think it's important to note that over 30 states since 2020 have sort of relegated protests and made policies and laws, that anti-protest laws, since 2020. So this is just another reiteration of that
Mm,
or a continuation of that. And I guess it's just going to the Supreme Court. But that was one of the things that we raised as a contradiction during the SOS Cuba in 2021 when all of these Miami Cubans took to the Florida streets, were in highways and all these things, calling for the regime change in Cuba at a time where they had just put out anti-protest laws. So they
mm.
were allowed to do that, but the Black Lives Matter related protests were banned. So that was a contradiction that we heightened. So this is just a continuation of that.
How does that affect BAP? Let's say if there was to take it to DC and this was now in DC, would you move to do have like a whole protest in your yard and videotape it, as in not step into the Capitol building where they can arrest you, or how
Mhm.
would you move on that?
I mean, to be honest, these particular laws in terms of anti-protest are not any fundamentally a deterrent to what BAP does than the what do they call not APAC, what's Jonathan Greenblatt's thing, the ADL.
Can't remember.
The ADL
ADL.
has BAP all over it, right? We have students who are members of BAP that are on the Canary thing. So this would just be another iteration of that. And I say all of that to say that there's been a lot of conversations around security, right? And there's an emphasis. I always like to circle people back to Sophia Bakari's The War Before, because she has a section in that book on security and the ways that we approach this question, right? The ways that we organize out of fear or organize through fear, right? And yes, we should be mindful that things are happening, but, and we should be cautious. And all of those things should play a role in our strategy and tactics, but they should not guide how we move, right?
Hmm.
So we should be aware that these things are happening. But Uhuru right now is under indictment for all the shit that BAP does.
Mm.
I mean, considerably. We talk about U.S. empire. We speak out against it. We're an anti-war coalition. We call for the sovereignty of enemy states, quote unquote, right? So that would put any one of us under the line. So the Supreme Court ruling is just another iteration of draconian laws that are already existing, that we should be more mindful of in terms of how we move, but it
Hmm.
isn't the guiding light of what we're doing.
You trying to shut it down? That's
Completely.
wild. I mean, ain't don't that go against freedom of speech, or is it freedom to gather? Is that's how they going to use that? As in you can't gather in certain spots?
I mean, I know the lies about with the protesters in NYC, like especially the most recent ones, they were, lying about like, oh, it's because you're not on the sidewalk. Oh, I'm arresting you because you have a sound device. And I think also the free right to assembly, like depending on whether something is private property or not. So there are all these little loopholes to say like, you can't protest here. But, we know that that's an effort to actually stop people gathering together. But as Ricky said, I think anytime you disrupt anything, I mean, we saw this when, was it the action last weekend, 2 weeks ago with the shutting down of the bridges, right? So anytime there's a action that really impacts economics, the flow of commerce, right? So shutting down the Holland Tunnel, or shutting down the Brooklyn Bridge, for example, or the Golden Gate Bridge, right, was, I think, 5 hours they managed to bring traffic to a standstill. And you have Tom Cotton, a representative, saying, so glad I didn't see this in Arkansas because we in Arkansas would throw these people over a bridge, right? Wow. So this is a representative of a state, apparently, and calling for the murder of protesters. Again, though, not new. So
damn, he said throw him over the bridge.
I will say y'all are pretty brave on that Brooklyn Bridge and that Holland Tunnel because that infrastructure is so shoddy. I'm not doing it.
Like the bridge, they might just blow up the bridge so that
I'm doing it. I mean,
and then not rebuild it.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been in George Washington because that's on the brink. Well, they keep doing this left in the bottom of that thing. I'm not.
Hey, speaking of bridges, how is that bridge going? What's going on with that bridge in Baltimore that collapsed?
Oh, well, beyond the Baltimore Strong campaign of Wes Moore, who is using this to reunite himself, and Brandon Scott, who is the current mayor running on re-election, who is also using the bridge to reunite his campaign, I couldn't tell you. I know Biden was here maybe a couple weeks ago, and he did a thing and said hi to the people and all of that, and then the bridge is still collapsed. So I don't know what's happening.
I wonder how the traffic is. It's still, I don't even know.
Well, I mean, I kind of use it now. Like, y'all know the bridge collapsed. You're not running late.
I love that.
Nice. Nice.
We're down a traffic artery. Yeah.
Yo, and since we speaking of mayors, something happened to the mayor of New York recently. Let's take a look and see what happened to the mayor of New York. All right.
So you're Eric Adams? Yeah, fuck you! You support the genocide in Palestine. There are homeless people all over New York. You're always partying. You don't actually care about the citizens of New York. Why are you even in Miami? You know there are people being arrested there. People are homeless in New York. People cannot afford food. You keep cutting the education budget so you can fund the police. That's all you care about, funding the police. Everything is underfunded because of you.
You're trying to get holding the line.
Sister shutting it down. Well, what's he in economy? Eric Adams, I didn't think that. I that's what shocked me. Eric Adams, economy ticket.
All of that.
Right,
Wait a minute, you ain't first class? The budget ain't allowing first class? Okay.
No, I don't know, because that's a traveling man. He'd be all in the videos. That is so I was shocked by that.
Next thing you know, he'll have a aisle seat. But yo, that's what it is. Somebody coming on, putting them on blast. Yo, that dude is really getting away with a lot of craziness right now. The whole.
Yeah.
What's y'all thoughts on the migration stuff going on up there?
I mean, in general, this is all the product of U.S. imperialism, the U.S. hegemony, the expansion of it. So yeah, that's my general thoughts. These things are going to continue to happen so long as the U.S. does not stop interfering in people's countries and nations and destabilizing them and calling for coups through lawfare and military and etc. and sanctioning these countries. I think the U.S. has over 60 countries sanctioned currently. And that's economic warfare by any other name. So, so long as these things keep happening, we're going to see this thing. But what I do think domestically, what we're seeing though is that while the U.S. is complaining, or while politicians or both parties are complaining about migration, it is a net positive for both parties because they're able to play on a particular tension between communities, which they are playing on tensions between communities to galvanize votes. It's the same that they do with any other single issue. They're playing on abortion for the same way, right? The Democrats don't have any strong stance on abortion at all, but they are playing it for votes. So I see the migration thing happening in that same way. There's no concern for the people, and the migration crisis coupled with the ongoing houseless crisis and housing crisis that exists. Especially in New York, I think they said there's 200 in 2021. There was 200,000 vacant apartments, and they were calling it the sixth borough, right? And then when you look at the amount of homelessness that still exists, and then when you look at what's happening in the migration, what's happening with that, and then to hear that these things are being called crises when they're easily resolvable, and to some extent or another, again, just circles back to the lack of people-centered human rights in this, what are we calling it, a democracy?
So I wonder, is migration moving throughout the country, as in from New York to Detroit, and with the houses being sold for like $1 in Detroit? I wonder if Piper Carter knows anything about that.
Piper!
Hi.
Peace, y'all. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, good. Yeah, I didn't go down to my basement. I'm in my dining room, so just. But
nice.
yeah, I mean, so the whole house. First of all, peace everybody. Peace to the chat. Peace Ricky. Peace Lucretia. Peace Ear Doctor, and peace everybody that's listening. So yeah, I mean, I think that's it's like a twofold interesting question, because we don't call people who would have to leave Detroit and go to the suburbs migrants, although they are, because they grew up here and they can no longer afford to live here, right? And they're excluded from being able to participate in the neighborhood because everything is all the things that too expensive, and too many white people that we don't want to be around. But besides that part, so we don't call ourselves migrants, right? But in essence, like, and we don't refer to like the reasons we have to leave as like a climate crisis, although it is a climate crisis. However we want to describe like the climate, you know what I mean? Whether it's the climate of the ways in which they like destroyed our neighborhood, so the climate has become, unlivable, or just, or the climate in general, right? Like the way weather is changing, and FEMA's giving people money to like replace whatever they lost in their basement, because we have all this basement flooding. But I don't think that people put those things together, right? So yeah, it's interesting. Language is really important. Like you always talk about that, like how important language is, and it is, right? Because it defines in our minds like how we want to think about who deserves, right, access to any form of resources, or who deserves to have clean, healthy water, or affordable, water and housing, right? So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna just put a pause there because I have so much to think about that, to say about that.
I mean, it is going down over there in the Midwest in Detroit, and then even to the point where I'm seeing that they're selling houses for like $1.
That's not true. That's a lie.
Yeah.
That's a scam. So what? That's marketing. That's like, you've seen them things on YouTube, and they're like free counseling. and then you click it, and it's like for only $4.99.
I'm sure you got a bunch of bells and whistles and stuff you got to do to get them.
Right. Right. That's
Yeah,
what
it's the what's that called? The auction. They put it. They're in like an
The
auction,
foreclosure, yeah.
and really it's like hustlers that like chase those, like storm chasers. They chase those auctions. So it's a bunch of people that's like corporate, representing corporate entities that like own whole swaths
Yes.
of like neighborhoods, and they're sitting on them, and then they wait for them to like decline, and then they wait for the price to so-called go down, and then they jack the price up, and they sell it to you, but you can't buy it.
right.
You can't bid on it, right? So it's a scam. It doesn't even really exist for real.
It's the exact same thing here in Baltimore that Brandon Scott is pushing. Dollar homes. It's and that, and using blockchain to track empty housing and things like that. All of these things are like private equity investment, more neoliberalism to solve problems that public institutions are supposed to solve. That's why we vote these people in. But I do appreciate what you brought, because again, to your point about language, it is a battle of ideas, right? So how people are understanding things really is important, because we can look at gentrification as that same mechanism of pushing it in, and I think all through the same sort of the ways that we talk about domestic and global imperialism being counterparts. When we say that we're colonized people here, to your point, right? We don't call those moves migration. And it's similarly for the same reasons, right? Our neighborhoods are over policed, or they're over occupied. We have the environmental issues in our neighborhoods that are brought on by corporations that are being outsourced into our communities specifically. So it's the same parallels. I think, well, not maybe the same, but I do see that there are parallels there that is important to emphasize, to make those connections, so people really start understanding the role that the U.S. plays in not just the destruction out there, but in their own lives.
Yeah, and speaking of which, so today's the 24th, yeah?
Yeah.
So tomorrow marks the 25th anniversary of the Flint water crisis. And out here, the Flint activists are doing a huge march and rally. If anybody's in the Midwest that could drive over, or Michigan, come through. It's going to be a whole day of action and activism, and they want everybody to just uplift them. Flint is still not fixed. The narrative is that Flint was fixed. They did not fix the infrastructure. The entire city's still living on bottled water. Imagine people having to bathe, to eat, to cook, to drink. But I, as a person who is a so-called able-bodied person, I can't even imagine having to be like live with a disability, where you actually can't even get access to fresh, clean water, right? The other thing they did was they had convicted the governor, but last year they overturned his conviction. So imagine if you get lead poisoning from age 5 and under, you have permanent brain damage. They poisoned the whole city, and there were people who already had all the conditions of poverty, and then add that on top. And they said they gave the city money. They didn't fix the infrastructure, right? So people are, when you see like what's his name, Jalen, what's his name, selling cartons of water to people, like that's not a solution. Okay, like they need the actual pipes of the city, like the actual water infrastructure needs to be replaced, right? A filter is not good enough.
Like, didn't Biden say that he had that all covered in his infrastructure plan?
He didn't.
Isn't it done?
I could put 100 activists on right now who will let us know which I do want to do.
How much has Nestle made from this? And
okay, let's talk about Nestle, who pays $200 per year to bottle water from the Detroit River, and they sell it back to the whole entire world. And everyone's banging on Nestle. The governor Snyder was like him and DeVos, Betsy DeVos,
Right.
we're like co-owners of Nestle. So it's all like this incestuous, disgusting mess of
Mm-hmm.
capital fuckery. And I think what's really disheartening is that for a whole decade, people have to still live off bottled water
Yeah,
because they won't fix the freaking infrastructure. Because they keep saying it's fixed, but it's not.
yeah. And I think what I took from that is when you were asking, like, could you imagine? I'm thinking, those are third world conditions, right? There are people, but I think what makes this exceptional in a way is that this is not a third world, right? We're supposed to be first world. We're supposed to have these amenities, right? And the fact that there's particular communities that are left outside of those things, that are intentionally um, removed from having any sort of access to these things of the first world does really speak to our conditions here. Like, I think it does cement the idea that we are colonized here within, because where else is that happening? Certainly that would never be the case in Beverly Hills, right? We would never hear about that. And certainly not on Peachtree. So there's cities and there's towns and there's neighborhoods and there's areas where these things are not going to happen, and for sure, especially in the South, when we look at where Lockheed Martin places factories, right? And then they call those Cancer Row. That's all our people. Where the military bases are in the South. It's around our people. So it's really, when you think about where they're looking to, where the infrastructure and these issues and these problems are, it's always where we're at. And I think that really speaks to our condition.
Well, also too, what makes this, I mean, let me not do the oppression Olympics. I don't like to say more or less. But it's all shitty, right? Like,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna try to work on my words for that. But I'm gonna say what makes this particular aggressive act extra egregious. That's what I want to say. Is that so the first entity to find out was University of Michigan Flint campus, and the way they found out, they had corroded pipes. So Michigan, the University of Michigan, they got a lot of
Money.
what do you call that, like find capital, right? So they have
Mhm.
scientists and whole departments to study that. So they did their tests and they figured out that what it was coming from. So if I back it up, I'll be so brief, but Michigan received what was called emergency management, and that was during the financial crisis. And emergency management is basically financial martial law. So a lot of different cities like Detroit, Flint, and others, like we did have elections and we had elected officials, but they weren't able to enact power decisions. And so they brought in people from the federal government to bottom line like all financial decisions. And one of the decisions that was made was to switch the water source for Flint, because Detroit has the freshest body of water in the world, one of the Great Lakes. And so a lot of municipalities get their water from Detroit River. So they were like, I think it'd be a little cheaper if we just go to the Flint River. Well, all the researchers and scientists were like, guess what? We don't use the Flint River, and we haven't used it since the 50s because it was it's been we contaminated, and we said it's condemned ever since the 50s. And despite the research and blah 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 blah, they decided to go for it. So any hooty Rudy Tooty, that's what's going on in Flint. It's not fixed. The governor got away with it, and let's keep banging on them and keep supporting the people of Flint until they fix it, because water should be free and water is a human right. But anyway, I'll land the plane there.
I think we
Could
have
I
a
just lift up before we move on the last one sentence you said, Piper, about financial mismanagement and what that actually is? I just love that sentence. Could you say it again?
Yeah. So when they create something called emergency management, it's actually financial martial law, which means everybody you voted for, you can keep voting, right? They don't take away like your power to vote. They just are not allowed to make any decisions that deal with finance, which is like all the decisions. And
okay.
they bring in someone, and that person comes in and they bottom line all the this. Like it's like bringing in National Guard, but they bring in something called an emergency manager, and then they just bottom line everything.
Okay. I know we have a clip.
This 10 years
That's Mama
been
Claire.
bringing people out more to say, okay, it's been 10 years, now what's going on? This is a welcome development, because then we get to say the water crisis is not over. There's still some unresolved issues here. I remember us being at a demonstration down at City Hall, and we had tape over our mouths to exemplify our voices have been silenced. And it was within a day or two of that they sent out a letter, a water advisory about TTHMs. You know, and then soon after that, they were having the big meetings at the Dome, and people bringing water that looked like English tea, and people were bringing bags of hair, and it just exploded, you know. People were, I got this, and you know, it just took off. It was very organic, and the more we learned, the worse it was, you know. You think, like back in 2015 and 2016, okay, you see the people suffering, you see the rashes, you see the hair, you see the compromise, you know, education and everything else, and you would think that when you raise these issues and when enough people come together around these issues, that somebody gonna do something, and it did not happen. I think the one thing that I would hope that people take away is to pay attention to Flint and learn how this happened, and get more involved in the political process, get more involved in the social movements. The residents have the last word on all these issues. Like I said in one of the other interviews, you poisoned the wrong city. Because Flint is in our DNA, that we believe in our rights, we believe in social justice, we believe we are somebody, we're deserving, and we demand respect. It's a Flint characteristic.
That was Mama Claire. She's the one organizing the rally and the march on Thursday, but she's a longtime activist, and maybe we could get her sometime, and or some of the other people in Naira, because Naira was pissed when Obama drank that water in their face, and he was about to get monkey paws put on him.
Yeah, that was a lot. I mean, I was equally as upset by that. But also, you mentioned a rally. Today is Mamiya's birthday. I do want to lift that up because in Philly today, there's a lot of action. Shout out to Mobilization for Mamiya. Shout out to Love Not Fear and all my comrades over there. I obviously am not going to be there this year. The first year I'm not there in the last 4 years. But I am sending my support. I know they have speakers. You know, Johanna Fernandez, Pam Africa, I believe Kalanji will be speaking as well. Bat Philly will be out there. So if you are out in Philly, please support. You can go on the Kerfest website, or you can go on Love Not Fear website, or Mobilization for Mamiya, or the countless social medias that exist around Mamiya, and find out more about where that action is. But do go out and support. And, you know, we brick by brick, wall by wall, we're going to free Mamiya. Abuja Mall.
Free Mamiya. And happy birthday, Mamiya.
Happy birthday. Is this the break? Should I do my best? Oh, nope. Here we go.
All right. So last week, I believe Thursday, maybe Wednesday or Thursday, I ran out to DC alongside some BAP Solidarity Network members and Zone of Peace campaign members to call for the U.S. to get their hands off Nicaragua. Marco Rubio and Tim Kaine have been pushing to have a particular policy and act around Nicaragua that when you play the clip, Jill here will explain. Jill is part of the Friends of Latin America and also part of the Black Alliance for Peace Solidarity Network and a longstanding comrade in Nicaragua. Much of what I know and seen has been because of Jill. So I think it's really important to hear what she has to say about this act. But I bring up both Marco Rubio and Tim Kaine primarily because I want to put emphasis on something I mentioned earlier, that both these parties work in tandem to do fuck shit. So if you want to press play, you can. You'd also have to
going on in Nicaragua in a global context. Nicaragua respects the kind of human rights that gives children food to eat, water, free education through graduate school, hospitals, builds new hospitals, has a better population to hospital ratio than wealthier countries like Colombia and Mexico because of all the hospitals that they're building, infrastructure, the best roads in Central America, and the safest country in Central America. But the United States does not like Nicaragua's policy of supporting the people of Palestine, for example. And so Nicaragua has been targeted for regime change, and there has been 2 horrible sanctions packages imposed on Nicaragua over the last 6 years. And there is one that has just been sitting in Congress since last June. And surprisingly, a week after Nicaragua did a beautiful job of defending the Palestinian people and upholding its international obligation to prevent genocide, argued in the International Court of Justice. Well, within a week, suddenly the Senate Foreign Relations Committee had time to look at that bill. They approved it in committee, and now it's moving on to other committees. So we are here to say, hands off Nicaragua. Do not punish the Nicaraguan people for defending the people of Palestine with new sanctions. Hands off Nicaragua.
Hands off Nicaragua!
So Jill mentioned a few things in that what she talked about. So this iteration, this bill, and this iteration of sanctions really affects us, me in particular. You know, I'm taking full personal assault around this because anyone looking to invest in any U.S. citizen looking to invest in anything in Nicaragua will be sanctioned themselves and face fines. So the whole point is to deter terrorism, to deter investment. We had my very good friend Ashley Graham on with Jared Ball the other day to talk about Sweetie's Coffee, and there was a question about reaching out to other nations, like maybe expanding with Cuba and Nicaragua. Well, Ashley can't do that with Nicaragua because even the coffee trading, meat trading has all been sanctioned. We know that coffee, with Nicaragua being over 90% food sovereign, has a very I don't want to say huge, but they do have a lively amount of co-ops that are centered around coffee. And this puts a legitimate dent in how they're able to function. And this bill is something that they have been trying to push for the last 2 years, right? It has made no leeway, no headway. And to Jill's point, we all know that Nicaragua is taking Israel to the ICJ for genocide, for the crimes of humanity, etc. And only a couple of days after that was announced, did they dust off this bill and push it through committee. So this is something that they are really looking to push. And again, something else that Jill mentioned, Doctor, if you want to pull up the article, well, it's not really so much an article, it is a statement from the Zone of Peace campaign in defense of Nicaragua. Jill, no, wrong thing. It's in the chat, the private chat. It should say Black Alliance for Peace. But so last Friday was the Day of Peace in Nicaragua, and last Friday is called the Day of Peace primarily because if folks remember in 2017, I want to say, 2017, 2018, I believe it was 2017. But there was an attack on Nicaragua. They tried to overturn the government. People took to the streets and attacked citizens, attacked the police. They said that, Ortega is a dictator, et cetera, and they tried to push a coup. It foiled coup plans, but because the coup foiled and it was protected, the country was protected by the people, they have designated the day a zone of peace. A day of peace. So I do want to read that statement. So if my producer can scroll and enlarge, because I am not an ant. Thank you.
Beautiful.
On the 6th anniversary of the violent coup attempt perpetrated against the people and government of Nicaragua, the organization of the Zone of Peace campaign extend their solidarity to the people and government of Nicaragua, and in particular, the victims of the terrorism which was paid for by the U.S. and European governments and implemented by their lackeys within Nicaraguan territory in order to destabilize the country. While we mourn the loss of life, severe damage to Nicaraguan economy and infrastructure, and the violent tactics used to terrorize the Nicaraguan people, we celebrate that our Nicaraguan sisters and brothers defeated this attack on their self-determination, and a stable peace has returned to the country. The United States has been intervening militarily in Nicaragua since the mid-1800s. In more recent years, the empire disguises its attacks in the form of hybrid warfare, a combination of coordinated disinformation, unilateral coercive measures, and attempts to isolate the country internationally, all applied with veiled threats of renewed violence. These tactics are used against any country that asserts its sovereignty, such as Cuba and Venezuela. In fact, the so-called popular uprising, quote unquote, in Nicaragua in 2018 was based on the, if you can enlarge that, Garimbas of Venezuela in 2014 and 2017, and the July 11, 2021 protests in Cuba were orchestrated from social media platforms in the U.S., like the 2018 protests in Nicaragua, also slated SOS Nicaragua as an aside. Unilateral coercive measures, commonly called sanctions, have devastated the economies of Cuba and Venezuela and are threatening to do the same to Nicaragua as they continually escalate. While human rights agencies at the service of empire criticize Nicaragua for persecuting those who have committed crimes against the people, they ignore the many Nicaraguans who are enjoying more rights than ever in the history of the nation. The right to food, clean water, health, education, housing, land, food sovereignty, employment, and peace. While agencies at the service of empire turn a blind eye to the public genocide taking place in Gaza, Nicaragua is continuing its tradition of defending our people at the International Court of Justice. We categorically reject all unilateral coercive measures, especially against the anti-imperialist countries of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, as well as campaigns to encourage mass migration. The American dream is sold to further destabilize our countries that are fighting stoically resisting a new strategy to depopulate our countryside and our cities. The measures are an attack on our development models and our capacity to produce our own food. The U.S. government is punishing these people for exercising self-determination and delivering the same people-centered human rights that all peoples of the Americas demand. We celebrate the peace that has returned to Nicaragua and congratulate the Nicaraguan people and government on April 19th, the National Day of Peace. Hands off Nicaragua. Que viva Nicaragua libre y en paz.
Yeah, hands off Nicaragua, man. Who? I mean, I got cut off, but who wrote that?
Oh, that is from the Zone of Peace campaign. So that is a collective body of organizations throughout the Americas, which includes the Black Alliance for Peace, Diaspora de la Paliente, which is a Puerto Rican group, Nicaragua Solidarity group, a plethora of organizations. We'll try to name it. UNAP. It's a bunch, but it's all across the Americas in countries like Colombia, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, Cuba, Haiti, in the U.S. But yeah.
I feel like one of the most powerful things is that solidarity right there. And that's what they don't want. They don't want, like, did you name, I mean, you were like, and a bunch more. Like, you already named off like mad countries that you're like, and a bunch more. Like, that's what they don't want. So I want to say, like, you know, viva to the whole collective that's working on this, because sending y'all some, this is powerful.
Yeah, and part of the campaign, to Air Doctor's point earlier that he talked about, like, how do we get people to understand certain things? We have been pushing this campaign. We launched it last year, April 4th, and we launched it from DC, Cuba, and Haiti simultaneously on the same day. So we had delegations in all areas. Myself and Cloud was in the chat. We're in Cuba with other comrades, and then Molotov launched it from Haiti, and then we had comrades here in DC. But one of the things that we're pushing as a, not just a slogan, but as a cohesive understanding is Nuestras Americas, right? And understanding that this is our Americas. And what does that mean? And again, to the point, if we understand ourselves as colonized people within this empire, then what does it mean to be a connection with the rest of the Americas? So that means establishing those sort of parallels, like the militarization, seeing these cop cities that are being built up, not distinguished from what was formerly the School of the Americas, but I think it's now called WINSEC, the Western Hemispheric Institute of Security, something. But yeah, and that's all taking place in Georgia, right? So we have a body, an institution that's training folks to go throughout the Americas and establish these coups. And then you also have, on the flip side, you have a body institution that's training to go throughout the state or even the city of Atlanta and terrorize the people there and put down protesters. And so these are the type of connections that, you know, we want to foster and why it's important. And then also to the point of understanding sanctions or unilateral sanctions, in fact, exist here through, you know, welfare reform and food deserts and housing, right? These are all sanctions in one form or another. So what the Zone of Peace campaign is doing is more than, I think, solidarity, yes, but the Zone of Peace was initially a demand from CELAC, which is it's the Institution for the Caribbean and Latin American. Lord, I gotta remember all these acronyms.
Lots of acronyms.
And because they're all in Spanish too, so everything like backwards a little bit sometimes. So, but CELAC is an institution that has long since existed. In 2014, which was 10 years ago, January 29th, they made a demand to make the Americas a zone of peace. They called for self-determination, the removal for the proliferation of militarization in the region, the respect for sovereignty, etc. But in the last 10 years, it's been like a head of state-led call, and so it hasn't really moved. And the way the CELAC is conditioned or positioned is similar to any institution. It's not the head of state or the director or the leader or the president of CELAC switches, right? And so one year you might have a really progressive CELAC body, and then the next year you might not. So when you're calling for a zone of peace through that institution that wavers and with ebbs and flows of politics and interests, then what does it mean to call for a zone of peace? So what the launch was essentially was calling for a more grassroots, bottom-up, people-centered call. And that's why there are so many organizations throughout these different countries involved in the call, because the intention is to make it a bottom-up call for the zone of peace. And in that, sort of push the heads of states to make a decision one way or the other. And we kind of see that taper out a little bit in terms of how we're calling for no occupation of Haiti, right? What does it mean to have organizations that are in these different, that's a part of the Zone of Peace campaign, that are in these countries that are looking to occupy Haiti? How do we make that a center call in those countries? So then, like I mentioned earlier, tomorrow is a day of action for Haiti. So pushing that call out to expand beyond just the organizations that are tied into the Zone of Peace, but building out a U.S. NATO out of the Americas network. And getting more people involved, either individuals or more organizations, and making those connections is something that we're trying to foster, because, you know, solidarity is not transactional. But when we see these parallels, and they don't need to be, right? When we see these parallels, the emphasis on the people-centered human rights, the emphasis on self-determination and self-sovereignty, and the, you know, being allowed to make our own decisions without being occupied constantly is something that we all want, right? So we all have at least a principle and a point of unity. Yes, and he did. Musa made a point after our Zone of Peace campaign that the president of Cuba reaffirmed the call because that demand was made out of Cuba in 2014. So he reaffirmed the call. We've seen Maduro also in terms of going to CELAC and reaffirming that call for the Zone of Peace. In terms of Haiti, that they are not supposed to be interfering militarily in that way, reiterating that call. So. No chauvinism here, not taking credit, but highlighting that these instances of grassroots movements and organization and solidarity does make subtle shifts, right? I'm not one for incremental change, but if you look at what's happening in the region, the existence of a Zone of Peace campaign and the existence of a network is really, really important right now.
And I feel like it's so fantastic, this idea of a zone of peace as a mindset, as a point of unity, like an ideological formation, right? Like the Zionists and imperialists are extremely strong on their point of wanting the hemispheres to evolve into war, right? So we can be equally as strong in our demand that it be peace, but not like an inebriated peace, like not a peace that doesn't have any direction or formation. And where do we get that formation? Inside of our organizations, starting political education campaigns inside of that. And also, so when we're talking to our people, right, we can make these connections of like, look, the reason why there's mass migration across our Americas is because the imperialist actions of the empire, and not just the United States, but the other empires, right? Like the UK just passed a law. We have the fascist, I think, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, unelected by the way, passing a law that to return people to Rwanda, if they're coming across the channel. And so, or what do we, in this debate about, well, what's the law of the sea, right? Do we turn people back that are drowning in the ocean, or do we save them? I mean, these are the questions of inhumanity are there as these people try to look for a better life. Why? Because their lives were ruined by imperialism in their home countries. And I think that's what we've seen come out of the movement for Palestine, is because that the demand of return home, right, has always been there. The demand of like, we actually don't want to give up our homes. Why don't the Palestinians just leave, right? If it's just terrible, why don't they just go? It's like, no, we want our lives in our homes to be viable and sustainable, and we'd rather not leave, right? So I think making these connections to what we said earlier of why we should care. I mean, we've said multiple times there are many parallels, and also being able to point to what's happening outside of the U.S. has a direct impact on what's happening to colonized people within inside of the U.S.
I think we have time for a break.
Yeah, a little quick break, but also let's get some, is that my mic? Let's get some shout outs to some people, starting with ZZ Lion Dance, and then $2. Emergency management is the IMF for Black cities. All right, big up ZZ. KJ Sakuma, $5. Hands off Nicaragua and any country fighting against Western imperialism. Liberation to all oppressed and free political prisoners immediately. All right. X Essentials. Did I get that right? $10. Thank you. Thank you. How about that?
Thank you.
And Alicia gifting 5 Black Power Media memberships.
Shout out to Alicia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, big up to all y'all tuning in. This is the Remix Morning Show. What we're going to do is take a quick break, come back. We got about 14 minutes left, so it's going to be a real quick break. Right here on New Other Than the Remix Morning Show. Let's go. All right. Big up, y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in. We got 418 people watching right now. Let's get 418 likes and subscribers, new subscribers. Come on and hit that button so you can know all the dope stuff coming right here to you. And big up to all those people that's sharing and letting other people know about the show and knowing about the channel. All right, so let's get to it right here, right now. I wanted to give, since we was talking about Poetry Month, I wanted to give a shout out and big up another sister who goes by the name of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Yes, let me take you all the way back to the 1800s. She was an abolitionist, a poet, an activist, a teacher, public speaker, writer. In 1845, she's one of the first African-American women to be published in the United States. Born free, we rarely free, but born free in Baltimore, Maryland, Harper had a long career publishing her first book of poetry at the age of 20. At 67, she published her widely praised novel, Lola Leroy, in 1892, placing her amongst the first black women to publish a novel. As a young woman in the 1850s, Harper taught domestic science at Columbia in Columbus, Ohio, at a seminary. Did I get that right? Seminary. Man, I messed that up. A school affiliated with the African Methodist AME Church. And in 1851, while living with the family of William Silk, a clerk at the Pennsylvania Society who helped slaves make their way along the Underground Railroad, Harper started to write anti-slavery literature. And after joining the American Anti-Slavery Society in 1853, Harper began a career as a public speaker and political activist. She also had a successful literary career, and she had a collection of poems on miscellaneous subjects in 1854. So the sister's been doing it, and she passed away at the age of 85, got to live a nice long life. She also founded and supported and held high office in several national progressive organizations. In 1886, she became superintendent to the colored section of the Philadelphia Women's Christian Temperance Union. Now, Temperance Union, and helped found the National Association of Colored Women and served as the vice president. So big up to this sister. She put in a lot of work and joined a lot of organizations. So hopefully you can learn something from that. Join the organization and you can make moves if you don't like what's going on. All right, with that said, let's get back to the sisters right here on the Remix Morning Show. All right.
Awesome.
So that is what it is. Do your research, learn about that sister, and see that it can be done. For a lot of people that's having doubts and not feeling like some things can change, join an organization and make it change. All right. With that said, I'll catch y'all later. Peace.
That was good advice, Ear Doctor.
The only thing I'll add is she was also a Unitarian Universalist. She joined, I think, the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, and so one of the first jobs she had, which she didn't want to do, was writing the obituaries of wealthy ministers in the area. And she was like, maybe I actually want to do my own stuff. And so that was how she was, started to be in a lot of these spaces too.
That I did not know. Well, just to continue on with the conversation around the Zone of Peace, I did mention that tomorrow's a day of action in defense of Haitian sovereignty. So the BAP Haiti Americas team, we have been doing a series of these days of action since the 20th year, I don't like to say anniversary, the recognition of the 20th year since the 2004 coup. That was in February. And since we've done one every month. So last month we were at Morgan State, and that Baltimore will be at Francois Caribbean Cuisine. So come out. We'll be having people talk about Haiti outside the restaurant, encouraging people to patron the restaurant, obviously. But also we'll be giving out some PE, like we have palm cards and we have things to distribute and things to talk to people about. We'll be also moving around the neighborhood, doing some door knocking, etc. Just so people can just have an idea about what's happening in Haiti. If you are in Baltimore or around Baltimore on your lunch break from 12 to 2, we will be out there. I promise you the food is fantastic. There's some vegan options. Doctor, he said he has vegetables. He ain't fucking with you. He said that he heard you say that West Indians don't eat vegetables.
We got some cabbage.
And he said he got the vegetables. So, yeah, please come out, because I think
no excuse.
At that point, Haiti is kind of leaving the headlines, right? Because there's no more speculation around gangs. They're not emphasizing that as much. But just because Haiti is leaving the headlines does not mean what they are intending to do with Haiti has stopped, right? So now they're in a point of reconfiguration. The Kenya courts have absolutely said no. Kenya's kind of trying to back out. CARICOM seemingly has taken the lead. There's been meetings in D.C. and Jamaica, back in D.C. again, around what's going to happen. Mia Motley has, also raised that they want to have a new government transition in, but not without ensuring some safety, which is, dog whistles for they need to be occupied first. So and Mia Motley, the progressive. So I think these are things that we need to be raising up and understanding, and just we cannot stop talking about Haiti, especially when we're talking about the Americas, right? Haiti has been longstanding a laboratory for what can be done. Currently, they have the Global Fragilities Act right now, with the State Department, the USAID, and a number of other actors in collaboration. And Haiti was the testing ground. As you can see, look at what Haiti looks like today, and what it's supposed to be is this sort of preventative measures of fragile states, right? So they are going in there with NGOs, and attempting to stabilize, quote unquote, a nation that they are, partially or fully responsible for destabilizing. And they want to move that further into what they're calling Western Coastal Africa. So the plans that they had and have done in Haiti, they're wanting to take it to Togo and Benin and surround the Sahel, right? Because they see the Sahel as particularly fragile and in need of occupation. So all of these things really matter as to why we say keep Haiti in the forefront. And to Nicaragua's point, Nicaragua right now is the only, I believe, country that has ousted the Organization of American States. The Organization of American States is less talked about, but does have a significant influence in Haiti and picking who Haiti's leadership would be, and setting up Haiti's government alongside the core group, alongside the UN, the US, Canada, etc. So we want to continue to lift up Haiti and not always talk about Haiti as the first Black republic, but keep Haiti in a contemporary context that because it was the first Black republic, it's important that we always defend it.
All right, bat. Big up.
Come out.
All right, nice. All right, well, we're about to get out of here. Piper, Carter, what's going on Beyond Breaking Barriers? What we got coming up?
So, man, we've been reading. There's a hip hop journal, a journal of hip hop studies that was put out during pandemic a couple years ago. But I've been reading that because there are different hip hop scholars that I look up to that have written about hip hop in a contemporary way, like from a feminist perspective, from a Black feminist perspective. And so I'm reading through those essays and things. I was an editor on it. I had totally forgotten that I was an editor on the thing. And so when I pulled it up and I saw my name for a minute, I was like, what? But I forgot I did edit it like a couple years ago. But it's really good, actually. And so I've been reading that and just taking us through some different essays and things around some the ways in which hip hop lands on us currently, and whether it's talking about like bedroom culture, like teenage bedroom culture. For just real briefly, if y'all don't remember being a teenager in your bedroom and just that was your world and hanging out, and how these days young people are just doing that online. and like what are the implications of that, right? And not just implications, but how do we also like think about that and not try to limit people. Anyway, there's articles like that, but then, you know, things that dissect lyrics and things that dissect, you know, all the patriarchy and all the things. But then there's also really powerful ways that, you know, hip hop is being looked at in terms of like reclamation and any hootie rooty tootie. Just going through that as a series. It's a long series. But I did have to take a couple breaks because I have 2 full-time jobs and I got busy.
I got tree.
Hey, that's my solidarity with the Caribbean, my Caribbean folk. I got 2 jobs and 2 businesses. But
Word.
yeah, so and real briefly, I do want to say one of my jobs, we do Black food sovereignty, and we're opening a food co-op. We bought the land, we built the building, and next month, if people are able to come out to Detroit on May 18th, we have the opening of, it will be a Detroit People's Food Co-op. So we'll have 4 commercial community kitchens and event space. We also have a 7-acre farm in the hood. Everything's in the hood. But so come through, holla at your girl. We got safe housing and all type of stuff. If you, but that's private hollering at me. But if you don't want to stay at no Hilton, but yeah. So just let me know if y'all want to come out and support. But that's that, and all that's hip hop. I know it don't sound like it, but all that is hip hop.
Hey, appreciate all the work that all of y'all doing on the screen, very much so. And like I said right here, go and check out Beyond Breaking Barriers when she talked about the Black roots of country music and stuff like that. There's so much to be learned on that segment, and they're waiting for a part 2. So check out all the shows. This is the Remix Morning Show. We come on every 8 to 10 a.m. Tuesday through Thursday. Thank y'all for tuning in to Women's Wednesday. As I take y'all out with a mix, y'all have a
Yeah.
Wait, I have one plug.
What up?
One last plug, because it's Poetry Month. Musa Springer has released Alive and Paranoid. Myself, Mohammed Occurred, and Salifu, we are in the foreword. So please check that out. Musa is a bomb poet, not a spoken word one. So please go support.
Where do we support it?
I believe you can get on any of the platforms. But you can definitely check out his Instagram and get that information. But I do believe it's on Amazon. But if you're anti-Amazon, I don't know where else it's sold.
And there's Alive and Paranoid.
Alive and Paranoid by D. Musa Springer.
Okay.
There it is.
Still 5 minutes, Ear Doctor. Still 5 minutes.
Whoa, we got 2 minutes. Stop playing.
Yeah,
Keep going. Keep going.
Look at that clock.
All right, we'll see what we can do there. All right, this is the Remix Morning Show, y'all.
Peace.
Once again, welcome out. This is the Remix Morning Show. I go by the name of the Ear Doctor. We came out to rock out with you and rock your world. So let's get with it.
All I'm on vibes. Come on. I went from hellions to the mini mansions. The girls in the Aruba doing belly dances. For half of my advancing, jar some brains in to make it through my circumstances. But you know I'm wiser now. Move like Kaiser now. Got a butter soft lover just to hide my pound. Got a house in the valley, come and find me now. Got enough dough to buy the town. So I might give a 6 to my chick, Benz to my mom. Crib so big it look like the Synagogue. Give her a couch just to spill Henny on. And been a dance since Lotto's and Benetton.
People say that I'm not the same girl. They say I think that I'm in my own world. What makes them think that I'm out of date? Yeah. A little joking, but it brings my problems. Be like you, I have to try and solve it. Yes, everything is the same.
Let's rock it out.
I'm just trying to be me, do what I got, do what I got. If people think that
what you doing?
This ain't no stop world. I'm just trying to be me, do what I got, proving. Some people think that this ain't no stop world.
That's what it is. This is the Remix Morning Show. We catch y'all tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. So tell a friend to tell a friend. It is on again. Peace, y'all.